So good morning, everybody, and welcome to Paths to Publication. We are grateful that you have come to join us today as we get to hear Dr. Craig share her expertise with us. As you know, Paths to Publication is a workshop that we do the second and fourth Thursdays. And we really are trying to help you all in pushing your own research agendas, your publications, writing, and grants. And we've also added in some of our sessions regarding the graduate student experience. So we hope that you have benefited from that. If you have registered with us, we have all of our publication workshops recorded. So I do send those out, and they're through GoToMeeting, and all you have to do is register for that. It's free, but you are able to go in and view any of our past recordings. So if you have not received a link for that and you would like one, feel free to email me. But just know we have that. Last time we had Dr. Ashlyn Kogut talk about so many amazing resources from the library, and everybody, faculty, graduate students can benefit from all of the things that she talked about. I would really encourage you to go back and see that. So anyway, without further ado, what we're going to do is Carla Garza is going to introduce Dr. Craig to us today and read her biography. And then we will allow Dr. Craig as much time as she needs, up until 11, of course, to share her expertise. And then we will have time for questions and some conversation. So if you have questions that you would like to ask and you don't want to forget them, just drop them in the chat and we'll make sure that those are getting addressed and that you have a time to have that chance to converse with Dr. Craig. All right, thank you, Carla. You are up.
So Cheryl J. Craig, PhD, is a professor, chair of technology and teacher education and Houston Endowment Endowed Chair of Urban Education in the Department of Teaching, Learning, and Culture. Her empirical research is situated at the intersection where teaching and teacher education and curriculum meet. Using narrative inquiry, she conducts research with pre-service and in-service teachers on campuses, typically serving high-poverty children of color at risk of school failure. Her research centers on the influence of various reform agendas on teachers' knowing, doing, and being, and the unintended consequences reforms and policies may have on student learning. Dr. Craig has delivered keynote addresses internationally in Chile, India, Turkey, South Africa, to name a few. She has been named a foreign expert scholar at East China Normal University in Shanghai and an honorary visiting professor at Northeast Normal University in Yangon. Dr. Craig is a past president of the American Association of Teaching and Curriculum, a past chair of the Narrative Research SIG, and a past chair of the AERA's Portfolio in Teaching and Teacher Education SIG. She is the current chair of AERA's Lives of Teachers SIG. Dr. Craig has served as the secretary of the International Study Association on Teachers and Teaching, expanding the organization's reach from 24 to 45 countries. An AERA Fellow, the highest recognition possible in her field, she was also bestowed her field's second distinguished honor, AERA's Division B Curriculum Lifetime Achievement Award. Dr. Craig has authored 11 research handbook chapters. She is a regular contributor to 20+ Web of Science journals. Her book, Narrative Inquiries of School Reform, was published in 2003. She received a Literary Network Award of Excellence in the United Kingdom for a chapter she authored, and 2 outstanding AERA article awards. Dr. Craig received ISAT's Outstanding Article Award, which was determined by reviewers from 6 continents. Most importantly to us graduate students, Dr. Craig earned a mentorship award from the College of Education and Human Development. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Craig this morning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Carla, and thank you, Karen. And I'm very happy to be here to be able to talk about the music of academic writing. Oftentimes when I'm invited to do things, I'm given what I should write, what I should talk about. And in this case, Karen gave me a wide open field And I really like that. So thank you, because I have a little bit of a strong writing muse. So my personality will say yes to this and that. And then my writing muse will kind of beat me up afterwards and say, why did you ever say yes to that? Now, what am I going to write about? How am I going to make this up? So then I have to work with a topic so I can make it my own. And that's what I do with almost everything I do. Try to find the angle that would make the topic my own, and that would give me, open up, would close the arguments between myself and my writing muse. And so making things your own is a very, very important task, which then brings me to, I got to do what my own wanted to do. And I want to talk about the writing and the music of academic writing. It very much is something that has very much shaped who I am, but I did not figure this out until about 3/4 of the way through my career, somewhere around 2011, 2012, even around there, I was starting to clue into some things that I was doing. So the music of academic writing comes out of two things. The first is my calling, and my calling is those things that I feel called to do. So I feel called to be an educator. I also feel myself called to be a vessel to bring forward the voices of people who aren't in positions to bring their voices forward. I also feel called to be representative of the, of the pioneering research line that I come off of. It's what some call blue blood. So I have that calling to stand up and look and represent all of that is my calling. But it also comes from my research signature. And this is something when I was a doctoral student, my advisor, I'll be talking about her later, Jean Clendinen, she had just won the American Educational Research Award, beginning faculty award. So she was sort of seen in ARA as the most promising assistant professor at that time. And so I possibly think that we were talking a lot about research signature because she was developing her research signature. Obviously, it was developed to the point where AERA noticed it, but also that she took that into her teaching and was really very much developing the research signatures for her students, although she didn't necessarily use that language, nor do I, but that is very much a big part of it. And so the notion of signature is this fact that I can write an article and submit it unreferenced. We can't use the word blinded anymore because that for diversity, equity, and inclusion reasons, blinded is no longer a word that the publishing industry should be using. So we have to use the word unreferenced. So my unreferenced papers would go in, and I would say probably in the first 2 paragraphs, somebody around the world will say, Cheryl Craig wrote this article. And I do the same with a lot of people in the academia. I read just a few lines and I say, ta-da, this came from Juan Jomena in Seville, Spain, or it came from Yuhabu in East China Normal University, or something like that. I will know by the voice, by what they're studying, and how they present themselves that that's their signature. And so this is where the academic world seems very, very big. It seems very, very big and running and all over places, but actually in the end result, it's very, very small. The number of people who are writing about particular topics, if they name the particular country they're in, that narrows it down. Then you could start for some regional stuff and you can figure out who everybody is. And so this opens up the gateway for me to think about how I can show myself in my research and move forward. And in the literature, you'll find that people live their careers and so forth, and we think that we're just going through this event and this event and that event. But when we look back, when we look back, there's a chain of meaning behind us. I moved from this to this to this, and we just think they're all not connected. But we live in experience, and our experiences are connected if we spend time to do it. Eudora Welty said that she was living her life and she was doing this and that, and a great writer. And then at one point she looked behind her and she could see a train track of meaning behind her. So when I was at the University of Houston, probably in 2011, 2012, I was asked to sit on a committee to determine the circumstances under which a student could be written a letter of exception for program emission. And this caused me to look at a lot of fine print on university documents. And I discovered, lo and behold, to my enormous surprise, I discovered that letters of exception could have been written for me, not only on one account, but on two. And so here I was sitting at a full, here I was a first generation college student. My brother was into hockey, so he was 11 years older than me. So he didn't go to college because he was expected to be on one of the beginning, the first circle of hockey players. And secondly, I was rural, and rural children are typically, because of the lower income compared to cities, are typically thought to be underserved, which well, that wasn't the case on my part, but that's what that was thought to be. And so this reading over these special policies at the University of Houston, here I was sitting, just discovering that I could get special consideration because I was first generation, because I was rural, and here I was sitting as a full professor with two bachelor's degrees, one master's degree, one doctorate, one postdoctorate, and I didn't know this. And additionally, I had been awarded Canada's top doctoral fellowship, which is Social Studies and Humanities Research Council of Canada. Many of them were given. I was one of the many, but they only gave one postdoc, and I was the person who had that. So here I am in the midst of this and not knowing that I could have drawn on my special circumstances rather than merit. And so this started me thinking about myself and how did this happen? How did I get into this? And it took me back to my high school. And I attended a rural comprehensive high school, and I never had a counselor. So how was I at first gen to get into university with no counselor? So I had to puzzle through that, and I realized there were some things that were going on for me. First of all, I had many draft dodgers, teachers, and even my spouse and I had the top scholars from Oxford in the university Oxford that were living in the US that migrated to Canada. We had them as our high school and university professors, and so very much affected by what was going on in the US. And also, we also had nuns who came from Quebec, the other side of the country, but also from France. And they spoke and taught eloquent English and French. And so that was going on in my life. And also that these were things that I needed to pay attention to. And so what I did was I copycatted my friends. They were copycatting their brothers and sisters, and I was watching them. I didn't tell them I was watching them. I was watching them, and every move they made, I made. And I also saw them applying for scholarships. So I applied for scholarships too, and I was able to get scholarships to pay for my undergraduate education, even though my family could pay for it. And so I did this, but I had lots and lots of friends who did not pattern me, nor did they pattern the colleagues that I was modeling. And so sadly, many of my friends did not copycat their peers, and regrettably, they fell through the cracks. So now I provided you some personal information that's got me to where I am. I want to give you some contextual information because I think I've already mentioned that I went into the #1 music campus in Canada. So here's some contextual stuff. My small town, here I am, my small town in Canada, and it was known as the wheat growing town. It had the #1 wheat seeds in Canada. And I lived in a set of problems which are considered the breadbasket of the world. So if all the grain that was produced there was able to go to market with all the restrictions, there would not be any hungry people in the world. No hungry people. There was enough grain to do there. But you know, the masterminds tell the people not to grow wheat, go do something else, we'll get more money for it. And then you take away from the food that could go to the people. So it was the #1 wheat town at that particular time. And during my brother's, because remember he's 11 years older than me, it was the hockey town of Canada. And there's a book about Canada and it's featured as the hockey town of Canada. This is very much my brother's history. And right now I have lots and lots of relatives, including my nephew who plays for the Dallas Stars. He's on the Texas Stars team, continuing that tradition. But I have many, many other relatives and people I know who play on the professional teams. And when I first came to Houston, the coach of the Houston Aeros was my next door neighbor son. And remember, he was about the age of my brother. And I can remember being in grade 1. And this was during the Cuban Missile Crisis. We went into the bowels of the school to duck and cover. And this big boy, he fainted. And I can remember standing there as a little girl thinking, what am I to do if this big boy faints? What's there left for me to do? But he wouldn't be happy me telling that story of his fainting. And of course, there was a lot made of what was going on with the boys in the community because it was hockey town. Everybody was talking about the hockey and all the heroes that were coming out of it. And then on the other side, there's the females, and nobody was talking about the females. But the females were being taught music and choir and performance in dramas and things like that. So that was going on, kind of silently going on. And so I took music lessons, voice lessons, guitar lessons, theory lessons, and I performed in a lot of performances coming out of this upbringing, which then brings me to my dream. So given that kind of rich musical background I had, my dream was to go into music education. And I lived very close to the university that had the top research program in music, and I wanted to do that. However, as I often do in my career, I ran into obstacles. Now remember, this is several years ago. There probably would be an exception for this now, but there was not an exception for it then. Even though I had totally certified guitar, theory, and voice teachers, and I had excellent grades, the problem was I could play the piano at the level, but my teacher was not certified. And so because my teacher was not certified, she was certified by the wisdom of her experience, and she was a fine teacher, I could not be let into university. I was blocked. I could tick off all the other boxes, but couldn't tick off that one. And so here we have the block that I can't overcome, but maybe there was something in the university things I could have looked for if I'd have known I had special exceptions as being a first to college and rural. So I could not do the bachelor's degree in music. And so I switched over, did a bachelor's degree in actually I majored in history and minored in English and music. And so there, this is what happened. And after that, my spouse then had a scholarship adversary to go to Calgary, Alberta, Canada, to be part of the economics department. And I went with him. And then the doors of opportunity opened. They were not hiring any teachers out of province. And I was coming from the other side of the country. They were not hiring. But they, at the very end, they needed someone for a particular school that was a general teacher who had a heavy music background. General teacher, educator, heavy music background. I filled the bill and they let me be the out of province teacher who taught. And so that puts me right into the schools. So I'm not going to talk about a whole evolution of career here. I spent 15 years of kindergarten to grade 6 teaching. So I'm a lot different than a lot of the people in the department. I became a teacher educator in my second year as a beginning teacher. I started teaching because I felt if people who are just beginning their careers would speak to people in their careers just beginning, that would be a good synergy. I have a master's degree and in curriculum. I have a doctoral degree and postdoc in research. So all that is my background. And so when I left the school district, I helped to lead the curriculum department. I was one of the leaders, and I was at the same time I was continuing to teach undergraduate and graduate classes at the university. So this gets me into what we're talking about. That's my background. When I went to university in my classes, I knew that there were two things that I had to do: evidence-based writing of academicians and simple writing of someone charged with communicating a message. So this evidence-based writing of academia was very much based on publishing. So you know that introductory class you do? The class I took, you had to publish in a tier 1 journal, a research intensive journal, one in Scopus or Web of Science, before you got out of your first class. So in the first class that I was in, there were many repeaters. And that's very hard to do in your first class. Now, I was very fortunate because I'd written an article the previous year, but I hadn't got around to polishing and putting it out. So what I did was, in that first year of my class, I polished and put it out and got it published, and I was out of that first class. But that's where you hear that big publish or perish thing. And it was very big and strong in my university. But every door of the people that you walk by in the hallway were people who are really well known in their field. You know, it was that kind of a place, especially in my postdoc years. Then there's Jean Clendinen. She won the early career AERA award. There's my advisor. And she was the first person to put words to something I'd been dabbling with for a very long time. And it really goes back to maybe there's some work of mine that my mother found from middle school, where I was dabbling, not to speak in the kind of heavy kind of writing that you do, where you use words that people have to have a dictionary beside them to understand you, to where I was trying to write very simply, but charged with communicating a message. And so she called it simply elegant writing. And when she used that word, simply elegant writing, click, click, in my head, that's the writing that I want to do. Now, I can do the other kind of writing very well too, but I really am very concerned about reaching audiences. And so I have to have a message. Since I'm carrying the voices of teachers, I have to have a medium that would invite people into listening to my work. And so this is the whole process, is to use elegant writing so that people can get inside the experiences that you're trying to share, and you share these underlying issues, the challenges of them, and the affordances. And here's this I would consider my most, although I have lots of honors, this would be my biggest achievement. In 2009, I had 2 articles published in the American Educational Research Journal, and in the same year. And the reason was, of course, that the editor changed, and one editor chose one and one chose the other, and oops, they fell in the same year. But here is my biggest accomplishment, I would say, and it comes out of simply elegant writing. And so I start to think about what are the things that I doing. And at that point, when I had two in the same year, I began to consciously think about what am I doing that allows these articles to be accepted when I know that the competition, they only published maybe two out of, maybe 2 out of 100 or something like that. I know JTE right now is only 3 out of 100. So how are you getting over this obstacle? And again, it really struck me. It's because I was taking my music background and applying it to academic writing. So what I want to do from here on in is this is a very different keynote. I'm taking you inside to the nuts and bolts of my writing, and I am talking about things that I do. And so this is pretty much, it's technical, and hopefully it's instructive and it'll be helpful to you. So one of the first things that we do in music is to capture the attention of the audience. Music always captures your attention. The first few bars of music that roll out, you decide whether you're going to listen to that or you're not. And then after that, the themes roll out. Well, it's the same with academic writing. What you write on that first page is very important. It has to appeal to the social, emotional aspect of the reader. It has to appeal to them. So that's a very important idea to keep in mind. What personal connections can you get in there that would appeal to somebody reading your work? The second one is foreshadowing. Now, I am basically looking back on my talk so far, and I am pulling on some examples of how I put this talk together, which is very different than I've done other times. Did you notice how I foreshadowed that I went to the #1 music campus in Canada? I put that in there long before I talked about me being interested in music. Those are the kinds of things that you do. Whenever you can, you drop in more of the context, drop in more of the details, and so that you're naturally moving people along. And so foreshadowing between paragraphs, between themes, building to the end, very, very important. So I'll write things raw, and then I'll go back and look at the foreshadowing that I can do. Music does that too. First few bars, bare bones. But as you go into each different one, you have all these different variations and taking off and themes and so forth. And what I'm basically talking about here is building to a grand finale, right? So I say I go to university, then I slip in, I go into the music thing. I go and I show what I did in the school district, but then I say, oh, I had this degree and that degree. I slip in, I had 15 years of experience, so I'm well prepared. I slipped in that I had 2 degrees in research, slip all that in. So what I'm trying to do is build my credibility, and that's what you'll be doing too when you're writing articles, is trying to build up to what you really want to say at the end, right? And to make yourself reputable and trustworthy to the reader. More specifically, I'd like to talk about doublets and triplets. In my words, you will find that I use da-da or da-da-da-da, right? Da-da-da, right? As in music, putting 2 beats on one beat with 2 words, or 2 beats with 3 words. So I use interesting, instructive, the issues, challenges, and affordances, right? And those are the things that you can go in when you're reading. Do I need a doublet here? Do I need a triplet? What do I need? And I use alliteration. Music uses it a lot. In the words that people are doing, I had one song there, they were using a lot of P's and in the song. And so in the lyrics, you'd pick that up. And in an article you're writing, you too can use alliteration. And I used interesting and instructive. I hope this talk will be interesting and instructive. That's alliteration. And I may not have used those first words, those in my draft. I may not have used those words in my draft, but when I came through, I said, uh-oh, this is a place for alliteration. I need to put it in. I guess my English background's showing up too. And I use substitution. Earlier in this work, I wanted to say the word phenomena, 4 beats. But to make my phrase end, 4 beats wasn't needed. So I had to have a synonym, and I do this often. I have the thesaurus open all the time. Instead of phenomenon, topic. I needed 2 beats, topic. And so phenomenon went to the cutting room floor. And I use interrupting. And one way you can interrupt is to ask a question and then have a long explanation. It's true also of music. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. So you can see you can use interruption for effect. And you can use one-word statements. So I first wrote, my pathway into music was blocked. And when I went through, blocked. That was what my pathway into music education was. Okay, so that's much more effect. It has much more impact on the reader. And repeating meaning, repeating sentences or repeating meaning in 2 sentences, even though the meaning is carried in 1. So here's some examples that I used earlier in my talk. Sadly, many of my friends did not copycat our peers. Regrettably, they fell through the cracks. This finishes the phrase off, right? Finishes it, ties it up with a bow. Or I said, trouble set in. My plan was hijacked. Much more effect. And I also said at the very beginning, most of my peers were not as fortunate as me. They repeated the class several times. And so that's way by doubling up meaning, saying the same thing in 2 different ways, you can reinforce the message, but also bring into a close the phrase of your paragraph. And my biggest suggestion to absolutely everyone is to read everything out loud. My doctoral students, I always tell them, read your whole dissertation out loud. Because if you're stumbling over the words, you can be sure that the person who's looking for simplistically elegant reading, listening, is not happy because they're hearing cacophony. It's noise, it's not flowing in their head. And so I reread everything, every revision. Now that's a lot of reading out loud. And I also use my phone to find out how many minutes and all that kind of stuff. I do all that. I use my telephone and I try it this way and I try it that way. And reading out loud is the most important thing you can do, because you will know when you read out loud if the paper is going to be accepted or it's not. Pretty much at that stage, you will know. If it flows like cream, the reader's going to love it. The reviewers are going to love it. And then I wanted to talk about variations on the theme. And this is a very big thing in music, that come on, they have the bare bone chords to begin, and then they improvise this way, and somebody improvises another way and another way. Well, I use this in my writing. 2000, a two-part series on the wall theme. And this is about the beginning teacher I worked with. And so she had divider walls. And so in one school that she was in, her teaching partner opened up the walls. And so I wrote about what it was when 2 teachers collaborated together. And then the other one, her other partner, did not want to have those walls open. She wanted them each to be single grade classroom teachers. And so then I wrote, and then I had this comparative of the same person working as a teaching partner or having the walls closed. So that's a variation on the theme. Here's a second one. This is I've written in the Handbook of Music Teaching. Isn't that interesting? Life Comes Around, 2002, with Randy Pembroke. He's a well-known quantitative researcher in the field. And he was writing an article with Jean Clendon and Michael Conley, and they couldn't find any common ground to write about. So Jean and Michael, Jean being my advisor, Michael being my postdoc advisor, they ceded the chapter to me. And so once I entered, I said, Randy, why don't you write on the quantitative theme, and I'll write on the qualitative theme, and then we'll come together at the back end. We'll call it two variations on a theme. And of course, Randy understands music, I understand music. We didn't get any clash, and we got the chapter done. But it was just trying to get it into terms that both of us could handle. And then here's teachers' attentions in teacher development from 212. So you can see I'm using it over time. TP Your School had stories that the teachers and the principals, they came and left, but these stories kept reoccurring. So that became variations on a theme as well. And I want to talk about using single words. As in music, people use chords, dum, 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 to get people's attention. We can use words in the same way. So this is very much part of the reading wars. I think the reading wars are still going on. I was asked to review a very important work coming out of the schools, Silence No More, Voices of Courage in America. And these teachers, some of them had cases that were either that they were paid out because things bad had happened to them, or they were denied. But also, you know, it was pretty much exposed that most of the quantitative researchers were passing the money between each other, blocking anybody else doing a different kind of paradigm. And actually, there was an attorney general who became involved and called the whole thing. And so, you know, and it continues. The reading wars continue. And so now that actually birthed the science of reading, because once you cancel and chalk off everybody else, you know, what your preference is left. So here's what I did: shocking, perplexing, disturbing. And I Silent No More, Voices of Courage. And it exposes the troubled underbelly of US education system and dismisses any ideas that we have about it. The tale is about the fates of educators who challenge prevailing orthodoxies, high stakes testing, reading instruction, artistic expression, controversial issues, race, class, gender, and I would add now the banning of books. All their family lives changed. They were alienated, but they carried on. And I showed how they told their stories in their words, in their voices, with their emotions. That's a triplet there. And hence their narrative experience gives us models of how their vision of what is possible to address what seems impossible in American schools. So there, the really thing I wanted to point out is those opening chords: shocking, perplexing, disturbing. And now I would like to turn to my Data as God paper. And I'm going to do something I've never done before, but I'm going to walk you through. This is the article that last year that won the Excellence in Teaching and Teacher Educator Best Paper Award. And it was also packaged, it was also a piece of my package of becoming the Legacy Award for Division K last year. So here's this piece of writing: Data as God, the influence of cumulative policy reforms on teachers' knowledge in an urban middle school in the United States. So there it is. And we're going to look at it in terms of, now, everything I've shared so far, you know, does it hold in practice in this paper? So let's look at it. Did I use teacher's metaphoric phrase in the title? I did. I did. The department chair said there's nowhere to go from here. Data is God. Okay, so that's the title. Very much my signature there, and very much his signature as well. Did I use beat for emphasis? Yes, I did. I used his words, and I arranged his words so there was a good beat to them. This is what we've come to. I left some stuff out. There's no other way to explain it. Left some stuff out. Data is God. Left some stuff out. Okay, so that's the way I got beat for emphasis in there. Did I use point and counterpoint themes? I certainly did. I had a lot about teacher as curriculum maker, teacher as curriculum implementer. And for those that aren't in the curriculum field, the teacher as curriculum maker is the teacher who uses exactly what the government tells them to do. No more, no less. Just deliver what those objectives are, and I'm out of here. Whereas the curriculum maker is the teacher who takes what's in themselves, what's in their students, what's in their milieu, and what the resources they have available to them, and they put it together with what the government tells them to do and provide a very rich, personalized kind of curriculum to the students they need. So I was using this, the curriculum maker was what this outstanding Department of Literacy teachers were trying to do. And the implementer was what's being pushed in through administration, making the teachers less able because they were asked to just do bottom line when they were already doing embellishment. And did I have variations on a theme? I certainly did. There were six variations on a theme over 22 years. And what those 6 variations of the theme, I organized them this time by years and by reform. And so that's the way I was able to animate what happened over this long stretch of time. Did I repeat thoughts to make paragraphs flow? Yes. Not surprisingly, agendas collided, tensions came to a head. Another place, another unexpected person to exit the school was the principal. I could have left it there, but I added, he was promoted to superintendent position in the school district. And then here's a longer one. This was when a new teacher came on. He had the most education of everyone. He had been in leadership, so he knew when people got across the line and didn't. So this is what he said to a staff developer. The male teacher reported that he was hired to do and who he was hired by was not the staff developer's business. He told her that a professional boundary had been crossed and cautioned that he would actively do something about it if their conversation continued. So then I did the same. I patterned him, but I did interpretation in the pattern. What he did not explain was that they were being required to do a long form process was not because the teachers needed it, but because he was a new administrative principal. What he also did not disclose was that their teaching performances would be closely tied to their students' high stakes test scores. What he further did not mention is that the edict he was implementing came directly from the chief superintendent's office. So you can see me stacking on, but also repeating thoughts to make paragraphs flow. And we can also use asking and answering questions. And what, readers may ask, happened to a teacher who was dropped in the grease, a good Southern metaphor, who found himself at the center of the ongoing controversy. He became director of literacy at a nearby school district. So he wasn't good enough in the school, and then he becomes the director in another district. And did I use alliteration? I used lots of it, but here's one example. But Anna's growth was about to go unrecognized and unrewarded. Did I add extra commentary? This is a little bit long, but I think it's good. I had, if this is at the ending, I know that I, walking in the teacher's skins as well as my own, found consolation in T.S. Eliot's words. I know now the end about which Darrell Wilson spoke clears a space where new beginnings, locally, nationally, and internationally, can spring forward. So that's the way I ended. But in the time that it was in, it was accepted with minor revisions. It was back with me, and something happened in the school district. So here's the embellishment of the theme. Afterwards, in November of 2019, when this paper was in revision, the state of Texas took over the school district to which T.P. Yeager Middle School belongs. The state appointed a superintendent and board of managers to run the district, citing that it had failed, in Governor Greg Abbott's words, to deliver the best possible education to every Texas child. I think that probably the teachers in that school would be standing up and saying, hallelujah. And so here I have shown, and I want to just transition now because, I showed you my journey with music, but I also have a student who had a journey with music, and her name is Uni Park. Some of you will know her. Uni was all ready to be a concert pianist. She was well in line. She was near the top of the pack, and it was coming through when she had an accident with her hand, and that blocked her music career. So she was blocked, and she needed to do something else. And so she too found that she could marry music and field-based inquiries. And so her work translates music and field-based inquiry. She takes topics such as My Data is God paper and sets it to music. And so she has taken what I'm doing and make it even more translational research. And that's, I think, one of the most upcoming fields in research is to be able to take something that's coming out of the field and then turn it back into something that could inform the field. And so I think that she gives an example of using music in another way in the field, different than mine, but ever is justifiable. But what I want to leave you with is not only doing your writing, your academic writing, but as you're doing it, analyze and examine the music behind your writing. Because I feel, I've read too many manuscripts that may be very good research, but when you read them, that your head, it's all this cacophony, it's all this noise, and it's not cleanly and taking you through in an elegant way. And so you could tell that whoever wrote that wasn't even thinking about what it would sound like for somebody reading it. So I'd hope that you would take some of these ideas that I've given you, and you'll probably find lots more of your own. But I want you to know there's a lot to be said of the music in academic writing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Craig. That was an amazing presentation. What I would like to do now is open it up for anyone that has questions. So if you have a question, you can either put it in the chat or feel free to unmute and go ahead and ask your question.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So first, let me thank you for the wonderful symphony presentation we had today. When I read the title, I was like thinking, okay, music in academic writing, I know like accuracy for writing, clear ideas, but it was very interesting and eye-opening for me today to hear the term and to see the implementation of term in reality. So that's really great. And the alignment along the presentation and these examples are very, very interesting to me. My question is, based on the idea of having these keywords in the interpretation of findings, what are your suggestions related to selecting codes from participants that might be more impactful and that could be aligned with more interpretation or explanation to make both the findings and the explanations of the findings very meaningful and providing clear ideas to the readers?
Thank you. Well, first off, the things that I'm apt to pick up as themes would be the most popular, the ones that have the most attention, right? That have the most attention paid to them, because we have to be truthful and present the themes that are most important. So I wouldn't be choosing which was most musical. I would choose which the themes they are, and then work on the music, so that the content would walk first and the music piece would follow. And so that's what would drive me in making those decisions. But remember, it doesn't matter what theme it is, there is something around the music of academic writing that you can bring in it, right? Whether with that reading words piece, I get this kind of fireball book review to do, and it's very controversial, but also that these teachers have kind of lived through very hellish experiences just because of the politics of how to teach reading. And you read it and you have tears in your eyes of what happened to their families and all of this stuff. And then you realize, you've got to draw people's attention to it. So shocked, boom, boom, right? And so you choose those kinds of you want to tell people like, I've had it with reading, the politics of reading. I'm not in the reading sphere, but this nonsense has to end, because in there it talks about all the corruption of a certain group of people taking all the money and just canceling out the rest of the reading researchers, right? And so, that kind of stuff, that's not democratic, right?
Yeah, thank you so very much. I really liked when you provided interpretation and discussion related to the quotation, not what the participants said, but not what they didn't say. So that's really, really interesting. So
Yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Craig.
Yes, and that's a strategy. That's another writing strategy. You use their words, but if they didn't give you enough about what really is going on, you do that doubling up and get the message through. Yes, and these things don't happen overnight with somebody writing, right? Because I've had a long career, but I was only looking back at this because I only became very aware of it about 2012, and so I had in the back of the mind sometime I'm going to write about that. And this open opportunity just, it was a marriage.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any other questions?
I'm sorry, I do have a question. Hi, Dr. Craig. Thank you so much. Hi. Thank you so much for the presentation. And I also very enjoy your presentation in the International Women's Day Symposium. And as you talk about, I think the read out loud is a very interesting a suggestion that you provide to us, and I probably will try it after I send my draft to my PIs. That's a good suggestion. But I was wondering if you have a certain the drills, writing drills or writing tips that you can give to the international students like me, who are currently conducting the English language academic writing, but they probably don't have English as their first language. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, just to let you know a secret, when I'm on journals, there's three kinds of things that I'm specialized. One is to tell the people who expect that because they're very famous, that they affect everything that they publish, they expect it to be published, everything they write. And, that's not true, right? And so somebody has to nicely tell them that, your work has to go through peer review just like everybody else's. So that's one of my jobs. My second job as a journal editor is to help beginning researchers. And my third one is I look after international papers. And so on the journals, some of the journals when you're writing to and international papers come in, oftentimes they'll be turned over to me. And so I'm not saying every time, but most times. And when this happens, one of my first things to do as an international researcher, I would suggest just use the basic words first. Just use the basic words first, and then go and use the thesaurus. Mm-hmm. And substitute, right? And add and embellish, but make sure you have the basic message that you want to get through first. Then you can start with the tricks of alliteration. Then you can talk about doublets and triplets, and then you can talk about repeating thoughts and sentences. All those other things can come afterwards, but make sure you have the basic flow of what you want in your article first. And actually, that's not just advice to English as a second language people. It's to anybody as a beginning researcher. If you're trying to do this, get your basic thoughts down first. That's when basically the basic message that comes for your paper is, if it's a good message and it's very consistent, there's a very good possibility that it'll be accepted. However, if you do all these tricks and stuff, I don't even call it tricks. I think it's a particular knowledge that you're bringing to the work. If you do all of that with it, then it's heightened possibility of being accepted. But start simple. Start simple. Simple is very important. And remember, simple is in the word simply elegant. You're simple first and you're elegant next, right? It's right in that meaning of the term. Good question.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Craig. Very enlightening. And thank you for the questions. And Dr. Craig, you really answered them to give us a little bit more to chew on. And so we really appreciate that. I do want to mention, because I didn't say this at the beginning, but we are thankful to Dr. Beverly Irby, who's the director of the Education Leadership Research Center, as well as Dr. Lara with Predella, because they are the ones that allow us to do this Paths to Publication and invite wonderful speakers like Dr. Craig. So Dr. Craig, thank you again for everything. And we appreciate everybody for showing up. We will see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.